Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. Buckle up because it's a wild ride. It all started online, obviously. Dating apps are the modern plague, but I was feeling optimistic. Swipe right happy even. Then I saw him. Liam. Dark hair, eyes that looked like melted chocolate, and a bio that hinted at a shared love for old horror movies and obscure indie music. Jackpot, right? We messaged back and forth for a week, witty banter flying, and I actually felt excited. Like, legitimately excited about meeting someone. He suggested this place called the Blackwood Diner, a supposedly retro spot on the outskirts of town. I'd never heard of it, but he swore it had the best milkshakes in the state and a jukebox filled with forgotten gems. Red flag number one should have been the fact that Google Maps struggled to find it, eventually leading me down a barely there dirt road that felt like it hadn't seen sunlight in decades. When I finally pulled up, the Blackwood Diner looked less retro and more abandoned movie set. The neon sign flickered erratically, casting long, distorted shadows. The paint was peeling, the windows were grimy, and an unsettling quiet hung in the air. I almost turned around. I should have turned around. But I'm not one to bail, especially when I know someone is waiting. So I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and walked inside. The interior was even worse. It was like stepping back into a time capsule that had been forgotten in a haunted house. The red vinyl booths were torn, the checkered floor was sticky, and the air smelled faintly of stale grease and something else, something metallic and unsettling. There were only two other people inside, an elderly woman hunched over a cup of coffee in a booth by the window, and a greasy-haired guy behind the counter who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Liam wasn't there. Okay, maybe he was running late. I took a seat in a booth and tried to appear nonchalant, pulling out my phone and scrolling through Instagram. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The silence in the diner was deafening, punctuated only by the occasional crackle of the ancient radio in the corner. I started to get that prickly feeling at the back of my neck, the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced around. The elderly woman hadn't moved, her eyes fixed on something outside the window. The guy behind the counter was staring at me, but quickly averted his gaze when I caught him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I decided to text Liam. Hey, running late? No response. I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. Panic started to set in. Maybe something had happened to him. Maybe he'd gotten into a car accident on the way here. Or maybe this was all some kind of elaborate prank. I stood up to leave, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the door, the elderly woman spoke. He's not coming, she rasped, her voice like sandpaper. I froze. Excuse me. She didn't turn around. He never comes. Who? Liam. She slowly turned her head, her eyes, milky and unfocused, locking onto mine. Liam, he's been waiting a long time. A chill ran down my spine. Waiting for what? She smiled a slow, unsettling smile that revealed yellowed teeth. For someone to join him. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, plunging the diner into near darkness. The radio blared static. The greasy-haired guy behind the counter let out a blood-curdling scream. I didn't wait to see what was happening. I yanked open the door and ran. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me, not stopping until I reached my car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them into the ignition. I peeled out of the parking lot, gravel spraying behind me. I didn't look back. I spent the next few days trying to forget the whole thing. I blocked Liam's number, deleted our messages, and tried to convince myself that it was all just a bad dream. Then, a week later, I received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small, antique music box. I didn't recognize it. Curiosity got the better of me. I wound it up. A haunting melody filled the room, a melody that sounded vaguely familiar. As the music played, I noticed something etched into the lid of the music box. A name. Liam Blackwood. My blood ran cold. I Googled the name. What I found sent me reeling. Liam Blackwood was the son of the original owners of the Blackwood Diner. He had disappeared without a trace in 1958. His body was never found. The newspaper article mentioned a local legend. A legend that said Liam had a date scheduled the night he disappeared. A legend that said he was still waiting for her at the diner, forever trapped in time. But the truly horrifying part wasn't the legend. It wasn't the music box. It was the picture accompanying the news article. A picture of Liam Blackwood. And he looked exactly like the guy I had been talking to online. Exactly like the guy who had lured me to that desolate diner. I slammed the music box shut, the haunting melody abruptly silenced. Then I heard a soft knock at my door. My heart stopped. I crept towards the door, peering through the peephole. Standing on my doorstep was the elderly woman from the diner, the one with the milky eyes and the unsettling smile. She held up a plate. On it was a slice of cherry pie. She spoke, her voice barely a whisper, but somehow I could hear her perfectly. He sent me to ask if you'd like to join us for dessert. The night was heavy with a thick fog that rolled in from the bay, wrapping everything in an eerie silence. I had agreed to meet Jenna at a quaint little diner on the edge of town, a place known for its retro vibe and greasy burgers. It felt like a scene straight out of a movie, the kind where you could almost hear the ominous music playing in the background. I was excited but also a bit on edge, which I dismissed as typical first date jitters. As I pulled into the dimly lit parking lot, my headlights cut through the fog, illuminating the flickering neon sign that read, "Open 24 hours." The diner looked charming enough, with its chrome accents and red vinyl booths. But something about it felt off. The air seemed thick, heavy with an unshakable tension. I parked and stepped out, the cool air biting at my skin, sending a shiver down my spine. Inside, the diner was surprisingly empty, save for an older couple huddled in a corner booth and the waitress who barely glanced up from her phone as I entered. I found a booth by the window and sat down, my heart racing in anticipation. I glanced at my watch. Jenna was running late. I shrugged it off, deciding to order a coffee to calm my nerves. As I waited, I couldn't help but notice the couple in the corner. They were whispering intensely, their faces pale, as if they were discussing something deeply unsettling. I leaned back, trying to ignore them, but the atmosphere felt charged. The way they kept glancing towards the door made my stomach twist. Just then, the bell above the door jingled, and in walked Jenna. She was stunning, her dark hair cascading down her shoulders, and her smile lit up the dim diner. As she approached, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I waved, and she slid into the booth across from me, her eyes sparkling with excitement. We started chatting, laughter bubbling between us, momentarily dispelling the unsettling vibe of the diner. But as the minutes passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. It was as if the couple in the corner had shifted their focus entirely onto us. I tried to focus on Jenna, her animated stories about her latest adventures, but I kept glancing at the couple. They were now staring directly at us, their expressions unreadable, yet filled with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I dismissed it as paranoia, forcing myself to engage in the date. Jenna was charming, and our conversation flowed effortlessly. Yet, every time I laughed, the couple's eyes seemed to narrow, and I felt a chill creeping up my spine. It was a tension I couldn't explain, like something sinister was lurking just beneath the surface of our cheerful banter. As we finished our meals, I suggested we take a walk along the waterfront, hoping the fresh air would ease my unease. Jenna agreed, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. We stepped outside, the fog swallowing us as we walked side by side, exchanging stories and laughter. The atmosphere was different here, the quiet hum of the water lapping against the shore soothing my nerves. But as we strolled, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being followed. I turned around a few times, half expecting to see the couple from the diner trailing behind us. Each time I looked, I saw nothing but the thick fog enveloping the streetlights, casting eerie shadows on the pavement. Jenna noticed my distraction and asked if I was okay. I laughed it off, assuring her that I was just lost in thought. The waterfront was beautiful, but the unease lingered, gnawing at me. I tried to focus on Jenna, her laughter echoing in the stillness, but the feeling of being watched returned, stronger this time. I glanced back one last time, and my heart dropped. There in the distance were the silhouettes of two figures lurking just beyond the reach of the streetlights. They seemed to be watching us. I quickened my pace, trying to shake off the growing dread. Jenna noticed my change in demeanor and asked if I was okay again. I forced a smile, trying to act casual, but I could feel my heart racing. The figures were still there, moving in and out of the shadows, their movements deliberate, almost predatory. As we reached a small park, I suggested we sit on a bench to take a breather. The fog was thicker here, wrapping around us like a shroud. Jenna seemed oblivious to my growing anxiety, leaning back with a content smile. I forced myself to relax, trying to enjoy the moment, but the creeping sensation that we were being stalked loomed over me. Just then, I spotted the figures again, lurking at the edge of the park. My breath hitched as I realized they were moving closer, their intentions becoming clearer. I felt a rush of adrenaline, the instinct to protect Jenna, kicking in. I stood up abruptly, my heart pounding in my chest, and grabbed her hand. We needed to get out of there. I pulled her towards the exit of the park, but as we rushed past the figures, I caught a glimpse of their faces. I froze, my blood running cold. It was the couple from the diner, their expressions twisted into something dark and menacing. I had seen their faces before, but now they looked different, completely devoid of the warmth I had imagined. They were no longer just onlookers. They were predators. I turned to Jenna, who looked confused, her brow furrowed. I could see the fear in her eyes as I urged her to run. We sprinted down the street, the fog swirling around us like a living entity. The sounds of our footsteps echoed, the sudden rush of adrenaline making everything feel surreal. We reached the diner again, bursting through the door, panting and wide-eyed. The waitress looked up, her expression blank, as if she had seen nothing. I glanced around, half expecting the couple to follow us in, but they were nowhere in sight. Jenna was still trying to process what had just happened, her breathing heavy. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. Just as I was about to suggest we leave, the bell above the door jingled again. I turned, my heart sinking as I saw the couple entering the diner, their smiles eerily calm. They approached us slowly, their eyes locked onto Jenna. I felt a surge of protectiveness, but as they got closer, I realized something was off. The couple whispered something to each other, then suddenly turned to Jenna, their faces transforming into expressions of horror. It was then that I noticed the small tattoo on the woman's wrist, the same one I had seen on Jenna earlier. My stomach dropped as the realization hit me. I was sitting across from a complete stranger, a woman who had somehow stolen her identity. Jenna lunged back, panic flashing in her eyes as the couple reached out for her. The diner fell silent, the whole world around us fading away. I was trapped in a nightmare, watching as the truth unfolded. The couple was not just a random threat. They were her family, searching for her. The fog outside seemed to creep in closer, enveloping us in darkness as the horrifying reality sank in. Okay, so, I'm usually a pretty chill dude, right? Not easily spooked. Seen a few things in my life that should have probably messed me up more than they did. But this first date? Nah, man. It's like a movie I'm still trying to figure out if I actually lived. And it all started with a damn antique store. Her name was Clara. I met her online. You know the drill. Her profile pic was kinda blurry, all artsy and stuff, but I liked her bio. Said she was into old books, weird music, and exploring abandoned places. Sounded like someone who wouldn't judge my collection of vintage horror movie posters, so I swiped right. We talked for a week or so, mostly about our shared love of obscure stuff, and decided to meet up. She suggested this place called the Curiosity Cabinet. Said it was this antique shop way out in the sticks, run by some eccentric old lady. Sounded interesting enough, plus I was always up for a road trip. The drive itself was kinda creepy. The sun was starting to set, and the road kept winding through these dense woods. No streetlights, no other cars, just me and the growing feeling that I was heading into a horror movie. Finally, I saw it. The Curiosity Cabinet. It was a huge, Victorian-era house, painted this faded gray that made it look like it was permanently covered in dust. The porch sagged, the windows were dark, and the whole place just screamed, "Don't come in." But Clara was already there, waving from the porch swing. She was different than her pictures. Not ugly, not at all, but definitely not what I was expecting. She was pale, almost sickly looking, with these huge, dark eyes that seemed to swallow all the light around them. Her clothes were all old-fashioned too, like something out of a silent film. But she had this smile, a kind of sweet, innocent smile, that put me at ease. A little. We went inside, and the smell of old books and mothballs hit me like a wall. The place was packed with stuff. Dusty furniture, creepy dolls, taxidermied animals, you name it. It was like stepping into a museum of forgotten things. An old woman was sitting behind the counter, reading a book. She didn't even look up when we came in. Clara led me deeper into the store, her hand lightly touching my arm. It sent a weird tingle down my spine, not necessarily a bad one, but definitely strange. She started showing me things. A chipped porcelain doll with unsettling eyes, a tarnished silver locket that supposedly belonged to a witch, a collection of antique surgical tools that made my stomach churn. Everything had this heavy, oppressive feeling to it, like the objects themselves were holding onto some dark secret. I started to feel uncomfortable, but Claire seemed to be in her element. She was practically glowing, her eyes wide with fascination. As we wandered deeper, the store seemed to get colder, the air thicker. We ended up in a back room, filled with old mirrors. They were all different shapes and sizes, some cracked, some warped, some covered in dust. Clara stopped in front of a large, ornate mirror. "This one's my favorite," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They say it shows you your deepest desires." I looked at the mirror, but all I saw was my own reflection. A slightly nervous guy on a weird first date in a creepy antique store. I didn't feel anything special. No sudden revelation, no burning desire. "I don't see anything," I said. Clara just smiled, a slow, unsettling smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Look closer," she said. I looked again, focusing on my reflection, and then I saw it. A flicker, a shift in the image. My reflection wasn't moving the way I was. It was smiling, but it wasn't my smile. It was wider, sharper, more predatory. And its eyes, they were the same dark, empty eyes as Clara's. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. "What the hell is that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Clara didn't answer. She just kept smiling, her eyes fixed on the mirror. And then, she reached out and touched the glass. As her fingers made contact, the mirror seemed to ripple, like water. And then, my reflection reached out too. It grabbed Clara's hand, pulling her into the mirror. I screamed, scrambling back, tripping over a pile of dusty books. I watched in horror as Clara disappeared into the mirror, her smile fading as the glass returned to its normal, reflective state. I didn't wait. I ran. I ran out of the store, out of the house, out of the woods, and didn't stop until I was miles away, back on the main road, surrounded by the familiar glow of streetlights. I never went back to the curiosity cabinet. I never saw Clara again. I tried to tell people what happened, but they just looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I am. Maybe it was all a hallucination, a product of too much coffee and not enough sleep. But every time I look at a mirror, I can't help but wonder. I wonder if my reflection is watching me, waiting for its chance to pull me in. And I wonder what happened to Clara, trapped in that endless, reflective world. Weeks later, I was doom-scrolling online when I saw it. A news article about the old woman who ran the curiosity cabinet. She had passed away. The article mentioned she had no known relatives, but had been rumored to have a granddaughter who went missing many years ago. The article included a picture of the old woman. In the background, barely visible, was a slightly blurry photograph on the counter. It was Clara. Except, it wasn't just Clara. It was Clara, standing next to a younger version of me. My heart stopped. It was me, all right, no doubt about it. But the picture was dated 1978. I wasn't even born yet. And the me in the picture had those same, dark, empty eyes. I was scrolling through my phone, swiping left and right in the endless sea of profiles, when I stumbled upon her. Her name was Lisa, and her smile practically leaped off the screen. She had this adventurous vibe, something that promised excitement and maybe a little trouble. So, I sent a message, and after a bit of back and forth, we agreed to meet at a quaint little cafe that had a reputation for having the best lattes in town. It was the kind of place that felt cozy, with mismatched furniture and a lingering scent of freshly baked pastries that could melt any heart. The day arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I put on my favorite shirt, the one that always made me feel confident, and headed out. The cafe was nestled in a quiet corner of the city, and as I walked in, the bell chimed above the door, ringing out a warm welcome. It was bustling, full of laughter and chatter, but I felt a little out of place, like I was stepping into someone else's world. I spotted Lisa at a table in the corner, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, and that smile. Oh, that smile. We chatted easily, as if we were old friends. She spoke about her love for hiking and thrill-seeking adventures, her eyes lighting up as she described the time she went bungee jumping off a cliff. I was captivated. There was this magnetic energy between us, a palpable tension that made my heart race. The more we talked, the more I found myself leaning in, completely drawn into her stories. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the cafe, Lisa suggested we head out for a walk. I was completely on board. I loved the idea of extending our date. We strolled through the nearby park, the sound of leaves crunching underfoot, and the distant laughter of children playing on swings. Lisa pointed out the stars beginning to twinkle above us, her enthusiasm infectious. But as we walked deeper into the park, the atmosphere shifted. The path became less defined, the laughter faded, and the trees loomed larger, their gnarled branches twisting against the twilight sky like skeletal fingers. I felt a twinge of unease, a nagging thought that maybe we were venturing too far into the unknown. But Lisa seemed unfazed, her adventurous spirit leading us further into the darkening woods. I tried to shake off the feeling, focusing instead on her laughter and the way her eyes sparkled in the dim light. It was intoxicating, and I found myself laughing along, despite the creeping shadows. But then, out of nowhere, she stopped, her expression shifting from playful to serious. "Have you ever felt like you were being watched?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I laughed it off, trying to keep the mood light. Of course, I hadn't felt that way. But as we stood there, I glanced around, suddenly hyper-aware of every rustle in the bushes, every whisper of wind against the trees. My heart began to race, not from the thrill of the date, but from a deep, instinctual fear. Lisa seemed to sense my unease and took my hand, leading me down a narrow, winding path that disappeared into the darkness. The trees closed in around us, and the air grew thick with silence. It was as if the world outside had vanished, leaving only the two of us in this eerie, secluded spot. She continued to talk, her voice a soothing balm against the rising tension, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every crack of a twig, every rustle of leaves sent adrenaline coursing through my veins. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it just my imagination? Or was there truly someone, or something, lurking in the shadows? As we walked, I tried to focus on her words, but my thoughts kept spiraling. I could feel her gaze on me, searching for something, and I didn't know what it was. Maybe it was just the dim light playing tricks on my mind, but I could have sworn I saw a flicker of something dark in her eyes, a glimmer of mischief that sent a shiver down my spine. Then we reached a clearing, a small, open space surrounded by towering trees. The moon cast an ethereal glow, illuminating the area in a ghostly light. It felt surreal, almost otherworldly. Lisa smiled, her eyes reflecting the moonlight, and stepped closer. I could feel the electricity between us, but it was tinged with something else, something darker. Suddenly, I heard it, a low growl, barely audible but unmistakable. My heart dropped into my stomach as I scanned the shadows around us. Lisa's smile faltered, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. It wasn't just me then. Something was out there. I took a step back, instinctively gripping her hand tighter. The growling grew louder, echoing through the trees, and I could feel my pulse quicken with panic. Lisa's expression shifted again, her playful demeanor replaced by something more primal. She looked at me, and in that moment, I realized she wasn't just scared. She was excited. I had just started to register that I might be in over my head when the shadows shifted, and out from behind a tree stepped a figure, tall and menacing, cloaked in darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I pulled Lisa closer to me. This wasn't just a thrill-seeking adventure anymore. It was turning into a nightmare. But then, in a swift motion, Lisa released my hand and turned towards the figure, a wide grin splitting her face. "There you are," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with glee. The figure stepped forward, revealing a familiar face, one I hadn't seen in years. It was her brother, someone I had met once at a party ages ago. I felt a wave of confusion wash over me. Why was he here? Why were they in on this twisted little game? "Surprise," Lisa said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. I figured it would be fun to add a little thrill to our date. I stood there, frozen in disbelief, as they both laughed, the tension dissipating like fog in the morning sun. What had I just walked into? My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of this bizarre encounter. The growling had been a prank, a staged scare to heighten the evening's excitement. But as I looked around, I realized the laughter felt hollow, and the darkness around us seemed to thicken once more. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Maybe it was just my paranoia, but I had the gut instinct that this night was far from over. We matched on some app. I don't even remember which one now. It was so long ago. His profile was, aggressively normal. Likes hiking, dogs, and craft beer. Basic, right? But his pictures were good. Not model good, but genuinely handsome. And he seemed to have a good sense of humor from the little bio he wrote. So, swipe right. What could go wrong? His name was Ethan, and we chatted for a couple of days. He seemed pretty cool, normal, maybe a little quiet, but nothing that set off any alarm bells. He suggested meeting up for a date, and I, being the perpetually single optimist, said yes. He suggested this old bookstore, the Dusty Tome, downtown. It was kinda quirky, but I liked the idea. Way better than another boring coffee date. The day of the date, I was actually kinda excited. I picked out a cute, but casual outfit, did my hair, the whole 9 yards. I get to the bookstore, and it's exactly how I pictured it. Crammed with books, floor to ceiling, dusty, and with that amazing old book smell. The kind of smell that just makes you want to curl up with a good story. I spot Ethan near the front. He was taller than I expected, and even more handsome in person. We said hello, the usual awkward first date stuff, and then started browsing. He knew a lot about books, which was cool, and we had a surprisingly easy conversation. We talked about our favorite authors, genres, the works. For a minute I thought, hey, this could actually be something. That's when things started to get weird. We were in the back section of the store, way in the back, where it was darker and quieter. It was filled with these really old, leather-bound books. Some of them looked like they were falling apart. Ethan picked one up, a small, dark red book with no title on the spine. He started flipping through it, and his expression changed. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic shift, but a subtle intensity. His eyes got wider, and he seemed completely absorbed in the book, like he was reading the most fascinating thing in the world. He went from quiet to completely silent. I asked him what he was reading, but he didn't respond. I asked again, and he just shook his head, still staring at the book. Okay, red flag. I tried to lighten the mood, joking about how he was going to get lost in the pages and forget I was even there. Nothing. He was completely zoned out. The silence stretched on, and it started to feel really uncomfortable. The air in that back corner felt colder, heavier. I had this weird feeling like we weren't alone, even though it was just us in that section. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he looked up. His eyes were different, like they were darker. He didn't smile, didn't say anything. He just looked at me, and it felt like he was looking right through me. "This book," he said, his voice low and raspy. "It's interesting." "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. He didn't answer. Instead, he held the book out to me. "Read it," he said. I hesitated. Something about the book, about his demeanor, made me feel uneasy. But I didn't want to seem rude or weird, so I took it. The cover was cold and smooth, the pages thin and brittle. As I opened it, the musty smell intensified, almost overwhelming. The pages were filled with strange symbols and writing I didn't recognize. It wasn't any language I'd ever seen. The symbols were intricate and unsettling, like something out of a nightmare. As I stared at them, I felt a growing sense of dread. It felt like the symbols were staring back at me. I tried to hand the book back to Ethan, but he wouldn't take it. He just stood there, watching me, that unnerving intensity still in his eyes. I started to feel claustrophobic, trapped in that back corner with him and that creepy book. "I don't like this," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I think I want to go." He didn't say anything. He just kept staring. I put the book down on a nearby shelf and started to walk away, towards the front of the store, towards the light. I could feel his eyes on me the entire time. I didn't say goodbye. I just got out of there as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I was back in my car, heart pounding in my chest. I didn't hear from Ethan again. I blocked his number, deleted him from the app, tried to erase the whole thing from my memory. But I couldn't. Weeks later, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen those symbols before. I started researching, spending hours online, trying to identify the language, the symbols, anything that could explain what I'd seen in that book. And then I found it. A website dedicated to obscure and forgotten languages. Buried deep within the archives was a page about a cult that worshipped ancient, malevolent entities. And there, on that page, were the symbols, the same symbols that were in that book. Symbols that were said to open gateways to something else. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I knew I had to go back to the bookstore. When I got there, the dusty tome was gone. The building was empty, the windows boarded up. There was a "for lease" sign in the window. I asked around, but no one seemed to know what had happened to the bookstore. It was like it had vanished. That's when I saw it. A small, dark red book, lying on the ground near the boarded-up entrance. The same book that Ethan had shown me. I picked it up, my hand shaking. This time, the pages were blank. That's not even the worst part. A few months later, I got a message from a friend. She had matched with a guy on the same dating app one used. She sent me a screenshot of his profile. His name was Ethan. His profile picture was the same as the Ethan I'd met, but something was different. His eyes. They weren't human eyes. They were cold, black, and empty. And then I noticed something else. In the background of one of his pictures, partially obscured by a shelf, was a sign. It read, "The Dusty Tome." I think I dodged a bullet, or maybe something way worse. But it all started, like most horror stories, with a dating app. I matched with this girl, Sarah. Super cute, dark hair, eyes that seemed to look right through you, but in a good way. We chatted for a week or so, and she seemed really cool, into the same music, same movies, even like the same obscure documentaries about weird stuff. We decided to meet up. She suggested this place called the Whispering Pines Diner, a bit outside of town, which I thought was kind of an odd choice for a first date. But I was trying to be adventurous. The drive out there was unsettling. The sun was setting, casting these long, creepy shadows across the fields, and the road got narrower and bumpier the further I went. There were these massive pine trees on either side, and the wind was whistling through them, making this eerie, almost mournful sound. I started to get this weird feeling, like I was being watched, but I figured it was just nerves. The diner itself was even more off-putting than the drive. It was this old, run-down building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. There were only a couple of cars in the parking lot, and the whole place just felt dead. I almost turned around and went home, but I figured Sarah was already inside, and I didn't want to be rude. I walked in, and the first thing that hit me was the smell. It was this weird mix of stale coffee, old grease, and something else I couldn't quite place, something almost metallic. The diner was dimly lit, with red vinyl booths and a long counter. There was only one waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Agnes. She gave me this look, like she knew something I didn't, and pointed me to a booth in the back. Sarah was already there, sitting in the booth, and she looked even more beautiful than her pictures. She smiled when she saw me, and I instantly felt a little better. "Hey," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "Glad you made it. Sorry about the location. I just really love this place. It has a certain charm, don't you think?" I forced a smile and slid into the booth. "Yeah, it's unique." I tried to sound enthusiastic, but I was still feeling uneasy. We ordered some food, burgers and fries, classic diner fare. The whole time we were talking, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Sarah was being super attentive, asking me all sorts of questions about myself, but she wasn't really saying much about herself. Whenever I tried to steer the conversation towards her, she would just brush it off or change the subject. Then there was the waitress, Agnes. She kept staring at us, like she was trying to warn me about something. Every time she came to our table, she would linger for a moment, her eyes darting back and forth between Sarah and me, a silent plea in her gaze. As we were eating, the lights started to flicker. The wind outside picked up, howling like a banshee. The diner felt colder, and I could see my breath fogging in the air. Sarah didn't seem to notice anything. She just kept talking, her voice getting softer and more hypnotic. That's when I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure standing in the doorway of the kitchen. It was tall and gaunt, with long, stringy hair and eyes that glowed in the dim light. It was just standing there, watching us, its face expressionless. I blinked and it was gone. I looked around, but no one else seemed to have noticed anything. I was starting to freak out. "Sarah," I said, my voice trembling, "did you see that?" She just smiled and reached across the table to take my hand. Her hand was ice cold. "See what, honey?" I tried to pull my hand away, but she held on tight. There was someone in the kitchen, staring at us. She laughed, a high-pitched, unsettling sound. "You're just being paranoid. This place can be a little spooky, I guess." The lights flickered again, and this time they went out completely. The diner was plunged into darkness, except for the faint glow of the emergency lights. Everyone started murmuring, scared and confused. Then I heard it, a scraping sound coming from the kitchen. It sounded like someone was dragging something heavy across the floor. Sarah squeezed my hand tighter. "Don't worry," she whispered. "It's just the wind." But I knew it wasn't the wind. Suddenly, the emergency lights flickered back on, revealing the figure standing right next to our booth. It was closer now, and I could see its face more clearly. It was pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes and a thin, cruel smile. It was wearing an old-fashioned butcher's apron, stained with blood. I screamed and tried to get out of the booth, but Sarah was holding me back. "Don't be afraid," she said, her voice now a low, raspy growl. "He's just here to help us." The figure reached out with a long, bony hand and touched my face. Its touch was like ice, burning my skin. I felt a surge of terror, a primal fear I had never known before. Then everything went black. I woke up in my own bed. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and it all felt like a bad dream. I checked my phone, but there were no missed calls or messages from Sarah. I tried to find her on the dating app, but her profile was gone. I told myself it was just a nightmare, a product of too much caffeine and late-night horror movies. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was real, that something terrible had happened at that diner. A few days later, I decided to drive back to the Whispering Pines diner. I needed to see it for myself, to prove that it was all just in my head. But when I got there, the diner was gone. There was nothing there but an empty field, overgrown with weeds. The only sign that anything had ever been there was a faded patch of asphalt, cracked and broken. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty field, trying to make sense of it all. Then I noticed something glinting in the sunlight. I walked over and picked it up. It was a name tag. It read Agnes. Underneath the name, in faded letters, were the words, EST 1952. I looked up, back at the empty field, and a chill ran down my spine. It wasn't just a nightmare. It was something much, much worse. The diner had been there for years, for decades, and the woman with tired eyes had been there just as long. So who was she? I don't know what happened that night. I don't know who Sarah was, or what she wanted with me. All I know is that I will never forget the Whispering Pines diner and the terrifying secret it holds. I never believed in love at first sight until I saw her profile. Not because she was some model-level beauty, but because she just looked real. Like someone who actually laughed at bad jokes and forgot to text back. We matched on this app that promised meaningful connections instead of just hookups. And after 2 weeks of back and forth, actual conversations, not just emojis and one-liners, we decided to meet. I picked a place, a little Italian spot downtown called Vito's, tucked between a laundromat and a boarded-up bookstore. Cozy, dim lighting, the kind of place where you could talk without yelling over music. I showed up 20 minutes early, mostly because I couldn't sit still. My palms were damp, my shirt felt too tight, and I kept checking my phone even though I knew she wasn't late. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different, but because she moved like she belonged in a different world, quiet, deliberate, like every step was thought out. She wore a dark green coat that hung just past her hips, and her hair was pulled back in a loose braid. She smiled when she saw me, small but genuine, and slid into the booth across from me like she'd been doing it for years. We started talking, and it flowed easier than I expected. She told me about her job at the animal shelter, how she fostered cats with respiratory infections, and I told her about my obsession with fixing old radios, how I could spend hours tracing circuits just to hear a voice crackle through static. We were two weirdos, and somehow that made it feel right. The food came, and it was good, better than I thought it'd be for a place this small. I had the lasagna. She had the mushroom ravioli. We split a slice of tiramisu, passing the fork back and forth like we'd been doing this forever. Outside, the rain started, soft at first, then harder, drumming against the window like fingers tapping. The lights flickered once, twice, but the owner just glanced up from the register and didn't seem worried. The air got heavier, the kind of damp cold that sneaks under your clothes, and I noticed she hadn't taken her coat off, not even when she went to the bathroom. I thought it was weird, but I didn't say anything. Maybe she was cold. Maybe she just didn't like exposing her arms. Then she asked if I wanted to see something cool. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, silver box, no bigger than a pack of gum, but old, like something you'd find in a drawer full of forgotten things. It had tiny engravings on the sides, swirls and symbols I couldn't make out. She placed it on the table between us and opened it slowly. Inside was a single black button, smooth and cold-looking, like it was made of polished stone. She didn't say anything, just looked at me, waiting. I leaned in, curious. "What is it?" She smiled again, that same small smile. "Press it." I hesitated. It felt wrong, like pressing a button in a movie right before everything goes to hell. But she was watching me, calm, expectant. So I did it. The sound was soft, a single chime, like a tiny bell, but the air changed instantly. The lights dimmed lower. The rain outside stopped mid-fall, and for a second, everything froze. Not like time stopped, but like the world held its breath. Then it snapped back. The rain pounded harder. The lights buzzed, and she was still smiling. "Cool, right?" she said. I laughed, but it came out shaky. "What the hell was that?" She closed the box and slipped it back into her coat. "Just a little trick. My granddad made it. Said it helps people connect." I didn't believe her, not really. But I didn't want to ruin the night by calling her out. We finished eating, talked a little more, and when the bill came, she insisted on paying. I protested, but she waved me off like it was nothing. We stepped outside, and the street was slick with rain, the kind of wet that soaks through shoes in seconds. The city looked different, quieter, darker, like the storm had swallowed everything beyond the next block. We walked together, not really toward anything, just moving. She stayed close, her shoulder brushing mine every few steps. I kept thinking about that button, the way the world had paused. It didn't make sense, but neither did the way my chest felt tight, like I was forgetting something important. Then she stopped in front of an old apartment building I'd never noticed before. Brick, tall, with windows that looked like they hadn't been cleaned in decades. A single light flickered above the door. "This is me," she said. I looked up. "You live here?" She nodded. "Want to come up?" I should have said no. Every part of me knew I should have said no. But I didn't. I followed her inside. The lobby was empty, the air thick with the smell of mildew and something else, metallic, like old pipes. The elevator was out of order, so we took the stairs. Each step creaked under our weight, and the walls seemed to close in as we climbed. 4th floor. 5th. She didn't seem to notice how long it was taking. Her footsteps were quiet, almost too quiet. Her door was at the end of the hall. 512. She pulled a key from her pocket, unlocked it, and pushed it open. The apartment was small, but clean. A single lamp lit the living room, casting long shadows. There was no TV, no couch, just a chair facing the window. On the coffee table sat another box, larger this time, made of dark wood, with the same swirling engravings. She took off her coat, and that's when I saw it. Her arms weren't arms. Not really. They were smooth. Too smooth. Like they were made of the same black stone as the button. No veins, no freckles, no warmth. Just polished, lifeless surfaces that bent at the elbows like they were hinged. I froze. My breath caught. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. She turned to me, her face still soft, almost kind. "You're not the first," she said, "but you're the first who didn't run when they saw it." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. My heart was slamming against my ribs. She walked toward the table, opened a wooden box, and pulled out another silver box, just like the one she'd shown me. But this one had 2 buttons. "I like you," she said. "I really do. And I don't want to hurt you. But I need someone to stay." The others, they left. And when they did, the silence came back. I can't live with the silence. She held the box out to me. "1 press," she said. "That's all it takes. You stay. I stay. The world pauses, and we exist in the gap. Forever. No time, no change. Just us." I stared at the box. At her. At the thing she had become. And I realized something worse. I wasn't afraid. I was tired. Tired of waiting for someone to understand me. Tired of pretending I was okay when I wasn't. Tired of feeling like a ghost in my own life. So I took the box. My hand didn't shake. I looked at her, really looked. And for the first time, I felt seen. I pressed the button. The chime rang. The world stopped. Rain hung in the air like glass beads. The lamp's flicker froze mid-blink. And she reached for me, her stone fingers gentle, and smiled. Now we sit in the silence together. It's not so bad. Sometimes, I think I hear the city outside, muffled and far away. But I don't care. She's here. And I'm not alone anymore. He was cute. Yeah, but not in a typical way. Kind of intense looking. His photos were all artsy black and white, mostly him staring pensively into the distance. He described himself as an enthusiast of the obscure, and mentioned a love for old books and forgotten places. Red flags should have been waving, I know, but I was in a screw-it mood. I was bored. He seemed interesting, and my best friend Maya kept bugging me to put myself out there. So I swiped right. We messaged for a week or so, and he was actually pretty funny, in a dark, sarcastic way. He suggested meeting at this antique shop on the edge of town that I'd never even heard of. Said it had a certain atmosphere that I'd appreciate. Alarm bells were kind of ringing again, but curiosity got the better of me. I told myself I could handle it, and if things got weird, I could just bounce. The shop was called Dust and Echoes, and let me tell you, the name was not an exaggeration. It was tucked away on this deserted street. The building itself looked like it hadn't been touched since the 1950s. The paint was peeling, the windows were grimy, and the whole place just reeked of old paper and mothballs. He was already there, waiting by the entrance. He was taller than I expected, with this unsettlingly steady gaze. He was dressed in a corduroy jacket that looked like it had seen better decades, and a worn leather satchel slung over his shoulder. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Glad you could make it. I thought this place would be right up your alley." We went inside, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. The shop was a maze of narrow aisles crammed with dusty furniture, stacks of yellowed books, and bizarre trinkets I couldn't even begin to identify. There was this oppressive silence, broken only by the creaking of the floorboards under our feet. He started showing me around, pointing out different objects and rattling off obscure facts about them. He seemed to know everything about everything, which was impressive, but also kind of creepy. He lingered a little too long near this collection of antique dolls, their porcelain faces cracked and vacant. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. He led me deeper into the shop, to a back room I hadn't even noticed before. It was even more cramped and cluttered than the rest of the place. The only light came from a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. "This is where they keep the really interesting stuff," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. He pulled a small, ornate box from a shelf. "Look at this. A Victorian mourning box. People used to keep locks of hair or teeth of loved ones who had passed away inside." He opened the box, and I recoiled. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single strand of dark hair. It didn't look old. It looked fresh. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. "Okay, that's something," I said, try to sound casual. "So, maybe we should grab some coffee or something?" He didn't seem to hear me. He was staring intently at the hair, his eyes glazed over. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small pair of scissors. My heart started to pound. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He snipped off a tiny piece of the hair and carefully placed it in a small vial he pulled from his pocket. "A memento," he said, finally looking up at me. His smile was wider now, and even more unsettling. "For us." That was it. I turned and bolted. I didn't say a word. I just ran, pushing past shelves and knocking over stacks of books in my panic. I could hear him calling after me, but I didn't stop until I was out on the street, gasping for air. I didn't look back. I didn't care. I just needed to get away. I blocked his number and deleted the dating app. I tried to forget the whole thing, but the image of his eyes, that vacant smile, kept replaying in my head. A few weeks later, I was hanging out with Maya, telling her about the whole disastrous date. She was horrified, but also kind of amused. "You dodged a bullet, girl," she said. "Seriously, that guy sounds like a total psycho." Then she paused, her eyes widening. "Wait a minute. Dust and Echoes. Isn't that the place that burned down a couple of years ago? The owner went missing. They never found him." My blood ran cold. "What?" I whispered. She pulled out her phone and started searching. "Yeah, here it is. Massive fire. Totally destroyed the place. The owner was a really weird dude, obsessed with Victorian mourning rituals and stuff." She showed me a picture from a news article. It was him. But that's not even the worst part. A few days after that conversation with Maya, I was getting ready for work. I went to brush my hair, and I noticed something strange on my bathroom counter. A small, ornate box. And inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, a lock of my own hair. His name was Ethan, and he was ridiculously handsome in his photos. Think dark, brooding eyes, a jawline that could cut glass, and this whole mysterious artist vibe. He said he was a sculptor and lived in this old Victorian house way out in the countryside. Super cliché, I know, but young and dummy was totally into it. We texted for a couple of weeks, and he was charming, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. So, naturally, I agreed to a date. He suggested a picnic at his place, said we could walk around the grounds, and then he'd show me his studio. Sounded perfect, right? Wrong. So wrong. The drive out there was already a little unnerving. I mean, I live in the suburbs, but his place was seriously in the middle of nowhere. The roads got narrower and bumpier, and the sun started to set, casting these long, creepy shadows. By the time I pulled up to his house, it was practically dark. The house itself was even more imposing than I'd imagined. It was huge and gothic, with turrets and gargoyles and all that spooky stuff. The paint was peeling, and the garden was overgrown, like it hadn't been touched in years. It felt less romantic getaway and more abandoned mental asylum. Ethan greeted me at the door with this intense smile. He looked even better in person, which only made me more uneasy. He was wearing a black turtleneck and jeans, and his eyes were just piercing. He led me through the house, and it was even creepier on the inside. It was filled with antique furniture, dusty portraits, and these weird sculptures that were honestly kind of disturbing. They were all of human figures, but their faces were distorted and grotesque. We went out to the garden for the picnic, but I couldn't shake this feeling of being watched. The air was thick and still, and the only sound was the rustling of leaves in the wind. We tried to make small talk, but I was so on edge that I could barely concentrate. He kept staring at me with that unsettling smile, and his questions were getting a little too personal. Like, he wanted to know about my childhood, my fears, my dreams. It felt less like a first date and more like an interrogation. After the picnic, he insisted on showing me his studio. It was in a separate building behind the house, and it was even more unsettling than the main house. The room was huge and filled with his sculptures. They were everywhere, on pedestals, on shelves, even hanging from the ceiling. The air was thick with the smell of clay and something else I couldn't quite place, something metallic and vaguely sickening. As I walked around, I noticed something strange about the sculptures. They all looked vaguely familiar. I felt like I'd seen those faces before, but I couldn't place where. Then it hit me. They looked like people I knew. My friends, my family, even my ex-boyfriend. But their features were exaggerated and twisted, like he'd taken their faces and turned them into something monstrous. I started to panic. I wanted to get out of there, but I didn't want to be rude. I made some excuse about having to leave early, but he just laughed and said, "Don't be silly. The night is still young." He started walking towards me, and I could see something in his eyes that terrified me. It wasn't lust or desire. It was something darker, something predatory. I backed away, knocking over one of his sculptures. It shattered on the floor, and he flew into a rage. He started yelling at me, calling me clumsy and careless. His face was red and contorted, and he looked like a completely different person. I realized then that I was in serious danger. I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, back through the garden, back to the house, back to my car. I didn't look back. I just kept running until I was safely inside my car, driving away from that nightmare. I didn't hear from Ethan again after that night. I blocked his number, deleted his profile, and tried to forget the whole thing ever happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd narrowly escaped something terrible. A few weeks later, I was scrolling through the local news online when I saw an article about a missing woman. She disappeared a few days after my date with Ethan. Her picture looked familiar, and then I realized why. She was one of the sculptures in his studio. The article said that the police were investigating, but they had no leads. I hesitated for a long time, but I finally decided to call them. I told them everything about my date with Ethan, about the sculptures, about the creepy house. They took my statement, but they didn't seem to take me seriously. They said that Ethan was a respected artist, and that I was probably just overreacting. A few days later, I saw another article. Another woman had gone missing, and her picture was also familiar. She was another one of the sculptures. This time, I was determined to make them listen. I went to the police station and demanded to speak to someone in charge. I told them everything again, and this time, they seemed more concerned. They said they would look into it, but they couldn't make any promises. I left the station feeling frustrated and helpless. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those missing women, about Ethan, about the sculptures. I had this horrible feeling that I was somehow connected to all of this. I decided to do some research on Ethan online. I found his website, and it was filled with pictures of his sculptures. As I scrolled through the images, I noticed something strange. All of the sculptures looked like people who had gone missing in the area over the past few years. I started digging deeper, and I found a pattern. Every time a woman went missing, Ethan would create a sculpture that looked like her. It was like he was documenting his crimes in his art. I realized then that Ethan wasn't just a creepy artist. He was a serial killer, and I had gone on a date with him. I felt sick to my stomach. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. Then, I remembered something he had said to me on our date. He had asked me about my fears, and I had told him about my fear of being forgotten, of fading into obscurity. He had smiled and said, "Don't worry, I would never forget you." I realized then that he had planned to make me one of his sculptures. I was supposed to be his next masterpiece. The thought made my blood run cold. I knew I had to stop him, but I didn't know how. The next morning, I went back to the police station. I showed them everything I had found online, the pictures of the sculptures, the articles about the missing women. This time, they finally believed me. They raided Ethan's house that day. They found the bodies of the missing women buried in his garden. They also found a half-finished sculpture that looked exactly like me. Ethan was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison. The trial was a media circus, and I was forced to testify. It was the most traumatic thing I've ever been through. But I survived. I escaped from Ethan's clutches, and I helped bring him to justice. I'm still haunted by what happened, but I refuse to let it define me. I'm a survivor, and I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. And that, my friends, is why I will never, ever go on another date from a dating app again. Okay, so, twist time. Remember how I said Ethan was a serial killer who sculpted his victims? Yeah, that's what the police and the media believed. That's what I believed. But here's the thing. After the trial, after everything calmed down, I started having these weird dreams. Dreams about the sculptures, about Ethan, about myself as a sculpture. And in these dreams, I wasn't just scared, I felt honored. Like I was part of something bigger, something beautiful in its own twisted way. I started to question everything. Was Ethan really a killer? Or was he just an artist, a misunderstood genius driven to extreme measures to capture the essence of beauty? Did he really kill those women? Or did they somehow transform into his art? It sounds crazy, I know. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the sculptures weren't just recreations of the missing women. They were better, more perfect. Like Ethan had somehow taken their flaws and imperfections and turned them into something transcendent. And then it hit me. Maybe Ethan wasn't just sculpting their bodies. Maybe he was sculpting their souls. Maybe he had found a way to transfer their consciousness into his art, to immortalize them in a way that no one else could. I started visiting him in prison. He never admitted to anything, of course. He just sat there silent, with that same intense gaze. But I could see it in his eyes. He knew I understood. He knew I was starting to see the truth. One day, I asked him a question. I asked him if he could sculpt me, if he could turn me into a work of art that would last forever. He didn't say anything, but he smiled. And in that smile, I saw the answer. I'm not saying I agree with what he did. I'm not saying it was right, but I'm starting to understand it. And who knows, maybe one day, I'll even join him. Maybe one day, I'll become a sculpture too. Okay, so, I have to tell someone about this. I haven't been able to sleep right for weeks, and my therapist just keeps saying, process your emotions, like that actually helps. I met this guy online, Liam. Seemed totally normal, you know? Good job, like dogs. Didn't send weird eggplant emojis. I thought, alright, maybe this is it. Maybe I've finally found a decent human being who isn't going to ghost me after 2 dates. I was so wrong. We decided to meet at this little bistro downtown. It's usually pretty lively, good music, decent pasta. I got there first, snagged a table by the window, and started people watching to calm my nerves. Liam showed up right on time, which was already a plus. He was taller than his pictures, which, okay, I'm not going to complain. He had this kind of intense stare, though, like he was trying to figure me out in the first 5 seconds. I brushed it off as nerves. The conversation was okay. He asked all the right questions. What I do, where I grew up, what my favorite movies are. But something felt off. It was like he was reading from a script, or like he already knew the answers and was just testing me. I tried to loosen things up, made a few jokes, but he just gave these polite, almost humorless smiles. Then, he started asking about my family. Not just, do you have siblings? But really specific stuff. Like, what my parents did for a living, where they lived, if they were healthy. It felt invasive, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he was just trying to get to know me. After dinner, he suggested we go for a walk in the park. It was a nice night, and I didn't want to seem uptight, so I agreed. As we walked, the park got eerily quiet. The street lights were flickering, casting long, distorted shadows. I started to feel this creeping sense of unease, like we were being watched. Liam started talking about this old house he'd bought recently, way out in the countryside. He described it in detail, the layout, the architecture, even the type of wood used for the floors. He said it had been in his family for generations, and that it was full of history. The way he said history made my skin crawl. He then turned to me and asked a question that made my blood run cold. Have you ever felt like you were meant to be somewhere you've never been before? Before I could answer, he grabbed my hand. His grip was surprisingly strong, almost painful. He stopped walking and stared directly at me, his eyes intense and unblinking. I think I know why we met, he said, his voice low and husky. I think you belong with me at the house. I tried to pull my hand away, but he wouldn't let go. I told him I wasn't interested, that I had to get home. He just smiled, a slow, unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. Don't worry, he said. You'll see. It's your destiny. I finally managed to wrench my hand free and backed away from him. I told him he was being creepy and that I was leaving. I turned and ran, not stopping until I reached the main road. I didn't hear from him for a few days, and I started to think I had overreacted. Maybe he was just socially awkward. Maybe I was just being sensitive. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Then I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo. It was a picture of me, asleep in my bed. The terror I felt was unlike anything I've ever known. I called the police, but they couldn't do anything without more evidence. I installed security cameras, changed my locks, and barely slept for weeks. I did some digging online, tried to find out more about Liam. I found a social media profile that matched his description, but it was mostly empty. Then I stumbled across an old news article about a string of disappearances in the rural area where he said his family's house was. Young women, all gone without a trace. That's when I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit around waiting to become another statistic. I contacted a private investigator, someone who could actually help me uncover the truth about Liam. The investigator did some digging and found out that Liam's family had a long history of mental illness. His grandfather had been institutionalized for paranoid schizophrenia, and his father had a history of violence. The investigator also discovered that the house Liam had bought wasn't actually his. It belonged to a trust, controlled by a lawyer who refused to disclose any information. I was terrified, but I knew I couldn't back down. I had to find out what Liam was planning, what he wanted from me. I decided to set a trap. I created a fake online profile and contacted Liam, pretending to be someone else interested in him. I used a different picture, a different name, a different story. He took the bait immediately. We chatted for a few days, and he eventually invited me to visit him at the house. I told the investigator about my plan, and he arranged for the police to be on standby nearby. I drove out to the house, my heart pounding in my chest. It was even more isolated than I had imagined. The house was old and dilapidated, with boarded-up windows and overgrown weeds. It looked like something out of a horror movie. Liam greeted me at the door, his eyes gleaming with excitement. He led me inside, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. It was musty and damp, with a faint hint of something else, something metallic. He started giving me a tour of the house, pointing out the historical features he had described before. As we walked through the rooms, I noticed something strange. There were pictures on the walls, portraits of women who looked eerily similar to me. Different hairstyles, different clothes, but the same basic features. I asked him who they were, and he just smiled and said, "Family." Then he led me down into the basement. It was dark and damp, with a dirt floor and stone walls. In the center of the room was a table with restraints. That's when I knew I was in serious trouble. I tried to run, but he grabbed me and dragged me towards the table. I fought him with all my strength, kicking and screaming. He was too strong, though. He managed to overpower me and strap me to the table. He stood over me, his eyes filled with a mixture of madness and desire. "You're finally home," he said. "You're finally where you belong." But then the unexpected happened. The lights flickered and died, plunging the basement into darkness. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the house, followed by the sound of crashing furniture. Liam froze, his eyes wide with terror. "What was that?" he whispered. Another scream, closer this time. Then a voice, a woman's voice, cold and menacing. "You brought another one here, Liam? You know she doesn't like that." Liam started sobbing, begging for forgiveness. "I'm sorry, Mother," he cried. "I just wanted someone to love me." The voice laughed, a chilling, insane laugh. "Love? You're incapable of love, Liam. You're just like your father." Suddenly, the basement door creaked open, and a figure appeared in the doorway. It was an old woman, her face gaunt and wrinkled, her eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. She was holding a rusty hatchet. She looked at me, then at Liam, her expression one of pure disgust. "You're a disappointment, Liam," she said. "You always were." And then, she raised the hatchet. The police arrived moments later, drawn by the renewed screams. They found Liam huddled in a corner, gibbering incoherently. The old woman was gone. They released me from the table, shaken but unharmed. They searched the house, but they couldn't find any trace of the woman. No footprints, no fingerprints, nothing. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Liam was arrested and charged with kidnapping and attempted murder. He's currently in a mental institution, where he continues to insist that his mother is real and that she's still out there. The police believe that mother was a delusion, a figment of Liam's disturbed imagination. But I'm not so sure. I saw her. I heard her. And I know that she saved my life. I still have nightmares about that night. I can still smell the musty basement, still feel the cold steel of the restraints. And I can still hear that woman's voice, whispering in my ear. I'll never understand what happened that night, or why I was chosen. All I know is that I survived, but I'll never be the same. I don't think I'll ever go on another date again. I still can't believe actually happened to me. It's not some urban legend or something I read online. This is real, this is my life, and honestly, I still get chills thinking about it. I'm not usually one for horror stories. I like a good thriller. But this was different. It was like stepping into a nightmare you can't wake up from. It started like any other first date, butterflies and all. But trust me, it spiraled downwards, fast. I met Sarah online. Her profile was pretty basic, cute pictures, liked hiking, reading, the usual. We chatted for a bit, and I thought she seemed cool, down to earth. We decided to meet up at this little Italian place downtown. It was a Tuesday night, the kind where you're just trying to make it through the week. The restaurant was dimly lit, candles on the tables, the whole romantic vibe thing going on. I got there a little early, snagged a table, and waited. Sarah showed up maybe 10 minutes later, and she looked even better in person. She had this kind of smile that made you feel like you'd known her forever. We ordered, made small talk about work, hobbies, the usual first date stuff. Everything was going great, maybe even a little too great. I'm not saying I'm cursed or anything, but things just don't usually go that smoothly for me. That's when things started to get a little weird. It started subtly. Sarah started asking questions that felt a little too personal, too soon. Not like, "What's your biggest fear?" Personal, but more like, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years, and how does that align with what you think my goals are?" Personal. It was like she was trying to map out my entire future and see if I fit into her plan. I brushed it off as just her being thorough, maybe a little intense. Then came the staring. She would just stare at me, not in a flirty way, but like she was analyzing me, dissecting my soul. It was unnerving. I tried to keep the conversation flowing, but it was getting harder and harder. She kept bringing the conversation back to the future, to us, to how we could build something amazing together. I was starting to feel claustrophobic. After dinner, she suggested we go for a walk in the park nearby. I hesitated, but I didn't want to seem rude. The park was deserted, just a few streetlights casting long, eerie shadows. As we walked, she started talking about commitment, about how she was looking for someone who was all in, someone who would dedicate their life to the relationship. She kept saying things like, "We're meant to be," and "I knew at the moment I saw you." It was getting really intense, really fast. I tried to steer the conversation away from the relationship talk, but she wouldn't let it go. She kept pressing me, asking me if I felt the same way, if I believed in destiny. I started to feel like I was trapped in a psychological thriller. Suddenly, she stopped walking and turned to face me. Her eyes were wide, almost manic. "Tell me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Tell me you feel it too." I didn't know what to say. I didn't feel anything except a growing sense of dread. I stammered something about needing more time, about not rushing into things. Her face changed. The smile vanished, replaced by a cold, hard stare. "Time," she said, her voice now sharp and icy. "There's no time. We are destined to be together, and you will not deny our fate." She reached into her purse, and I froze. I didn't know what she was going to pull out, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. She pulled out a ring. A wedding ring. "Put it on," she said, holding it out to me. "Put it on, and we can finally be together." I backed away slowly, shaking my head. "I can't," I said. "I don't even know you." Her eyes narrowed. "You will," she said. "You will know me. You will love me. You will be mine." I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, not looking back. I could hear her behind me, her footsteps echoing in the empty park. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, jumped in, and locked the doors. I drove home in a daze, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't believe what had just happened. It was like something out of a horror movie. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about her eyes, about her words. I started to question everything. Was I overreacting? Was she just really eager? No, something was definitely wrong. The next morning, I did some research. I looked up her name online, and nothing came up. No social media, no work history, nothing. It was like she didn't exist. That's when I started to panic. I decided to go back to the restaurant where we had our date. I talked to the manager, showed him a picture of Sarah, and asked if he remembered her. He looked at the picture, his brow furrowed. "I don't think so," he said. "We haven't had anyone matching that description here recently." I was starting to lose it. I felt like I was going crazy. Had I imagined the whole thing? Was I losing my mind? Then, the manager said something that made my blood run cold. "Actually," he said, "there was a woman here a few weeks ago asking about you. She had a picture of you. Said she was your girlfriend. We told her we hadn't seen you." He paused, then added, "She looked a lot like the woman in the picture you showed me." That's when it hit me. Sarah wasn't just some overly eager date. She was obsessed. She had been stalking me, planning this whole thing. I went to the police, told them everything. They took my statement, but they couldn't do much without any evidence. I felt helpless, vulnerable. I changed my locks, installed security cameras, and basically turned my apartment into a fortress. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid that she would show up. Weeks went by, and nothing happened. I started to relax, to think that maybe she had given up. Maybe she had found someone else to obsess over. Then one night, I got a call. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, but I answered it. "Hello," I said. There was silence on the other end of the line, then a faint whisper. "We're meant to be together." I hung up immediately, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew it was her. She was still out there. I called the police again, but they still couldn't do anything. I was on my own. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I hired a private investigator to track her down. It took a few weeks, but he finally found her. She was living in a small town a few hours away, under a different name. She had a new job, a new life. It seemed like she had moved on. But then the investigator sent me something else. A picture. A picture of her new boyfriend. He looked exactly like me. That's when I realized the truth. Sarah wasn't obsessed with me. She was obsessed with the idea of me. She wasn't in love with me. She was in love with the image she had created in her head. And now, she had found someone else to project that image onto. I felt a strange mix of relief and horror. Relief that I was finally free of her, but horror at the thought of what she was going to do to this new guy. I knew I couldn't just stand by and let it happen. I had to warn him. I contacted him, told him everything. He didn't believe me at first, but I showed him the evidence, the pictures, the police reports. Eventually, he came around. He was scared, but he was also grateful. He broke up with Sarah immediately and moved away. I haven't heard from her since. I don't know where she is or what she's doing, but I know that she's out there, somewhere, looking for her next victim. And that thought still haunts me to this day. So yeah, that was my worst first date. I still have trouble trusting people, and I definitely do a lot more research before going out with someone new. You never know what kind of crazy is lurking beneath the surface. And the worst part? I still can't eat at Italian restaurants. The smell of the sauce just reminds me of that night, of her. and the feeling of pure, unadulterated terror. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones under your bed, but the ones sitting across from you at the dinner table. Okay, so, I'm not usually one to share stuff like this, mostly cause it makes me sound totally insane, but whatever. You asked for a first date horror story, and trust me, I've got one. Buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride. I still get chills thinking about it. It all started with a dating app, the usual way these things do. Swipe right on this guy, Liam. Cute, seemed normal enough, liked hiking, which I'm kinda into. We chatted for a week or so, and he seemed really nice. Maybe a little intense, but I figured, hey, everyone's a little weird, right? We decided to meet up at this new cafe downtown. It was supposed to be all artsy and cool, with local bands playing and stuff. I was actually looking forward to it. I picked out this new dress I'd been wanting to wear, did my hair, the whole 9 yards. You know, trying to make a good impression. Liam was already there when I arrived. He was even more attractive in person, which, okay, bonus points. He had this really intense gaze, though, like he was trying to see right through me. I just brushed it off his nerves, I guess. We ordered coffee, and the conversation started off pretty normal. Work, hobbies, stupid stuff you talk about on a first date. But then, things started to get weird. He started asking me really personal questions, like, way too personal for a first date. Questions about my childhood, my deepest fears, my dreams. I tried to deflect, make a joke out of it, but he just kept pushing. It was like he was trying to unlock something inside me. The cafe was pretty crowded, but I started to feel like we were the only two people there. The music faded into the background, and all I could hear was his voice, drilling into my head. He started talking about this theory he had, about how people have hidden potential, dormant powers that can be unlocked through certain methods. He didn't really elaborate on the methods, but the way he said it made my skin crawl. I tried to change the subject, asked him about his job, anything to get away from this creepy tangent. But he just steered the conversation right back. He seemed obsessed with this idea, like it was the only thing that mattered. Then, he reached across the table and took my hand. His hand was ice cold, and his grip was way too tight. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "I think you have a lot of potential, Sarah. I can feel it." My blood ran cold. I yanked my hand away and stood up. "I think I should go," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice was shaking. He didn't try to stop me. He just sat there, watching me with this unnerving smile on his face. "I understand," he said, "but we'll meet again. I'm sure of it." I practically ran out of the cafe. I didn't stop until I was a block away, gasping for air. I felt like I'd just escaped some kind of cult. I blocked Liam's number, deleted him from all my social media, and tried to forget the whole thing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me. Everywhere I went, I felt his eyes on me. A few weeks later, I was walking home from work late one night. The streets were deserted, and the only sound was the click of my heels on the pavement. I started to get that familiar feeling, like I was being followed. I turned around, but there was no one there. Just shadows and empty storefronts. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was all in my head. But then I saw him, standing in the shadows across the street. Liam. He was smiling, that same unnerving smile from the cafe. I froze. I didn't know what to do. Run? Scream? My mind went blank. He started to cross the street, slowly, deliberately. I could see the glint of something in his hand. A knife. I couldn't tell. Just as he reached the sidewalk, a car came speeding around the corner, headlights blinding me. There was a screech of tires, a sickening thud. I blinked, trying to clear my vision. The car was gone, and so was Liam. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Had I really seen him? Or was I hallucinating? I walked over to where he'd been standing, half expecting to find a body, or at least some blood. But there was nothing, just an empty sidewalk. I went home that night, locked all the doors and windows, and didn't sleep a wink. I was convinced that Liam was going to come back, that he was going to find me. The next day, I went to the police and told them everything. They listened to my story, but they didn't seem to take me seriously. They said there was no evidence of any crime, No record of Liam, nothing. They suggested I might be suffering from some kind of stress-induced delusion. I started to think they were right. Maybe I was going crazy. Maybe Liam was just a figment of my imagination. But then, a few weeks later, I got a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I hesitated before opening it, afraid of what I might find. Inside the box was a single object, a smooth, gray stone. It looked ordinary enough, but when I picked it up, I felt a strange energy coursing through me, like a jolt of electricity. And then I understood. Liam wasn't trying to unlock my potential. He was trying to steal it. The stone was a conduit, a vessel for transferring energy. He wanted to take my life force, my essence, and use it for his own purposes. The date, the questions, the unsettling atmosphere. It was all a carefully orchestrated ritual. He needed to establish a connection with me, to weaken my defenses, before he could take what he wanted. The car that hit him wasn't an accident. It was a distraction, a way for him to escape with my stolen energy. And now, the stone was here in my hands, a reminder of what he had done, and a promise of what was to come. I don't know what Liam is planning, or what he intends to do with my energy. But I know one thing. I'm not going to let him get away with it. I'm going to find him, and I'm going to take back what's mine. The thing is, I'm starting to feel different, stronger. Like that potential he was talking about is actually surfacing. Maybe that weirdo actually did me a favor, just in the most twisted way possible. It's like I'm waking up to something I never knew existed within myself. It's scary, sure, but also exhilarating. And I'm starting to think Liam messed with the wrong girl.